It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back to the program today. So I followed this. I remember an instance during a special session a year or so ago where, and I remember this because I interviewed Jerry Cox on this because there appeared to have been some legislation that was filed during the special session where they were trying to change, your right to trial by jury if, you were a nursing home owner. They're trying to sneak that into some legislation. And that was actually taken out at the time, I believe, and soundly defeated. And I believe this had to do with now indicted former Senator Jeremy Hutchinson. This is what he was trying to do. But there was also a provision in that piece of legislation by the Arkansas Bankers Association where they wanted people to waive their right to a day in court when they signed a loan application. I'm sorry, when they signed the loan docs, the loan paperwork. And Mike Masterson has recently brought this to light, how that particular piece of legislation got through, and it affected a man by the name of Kenneth Tiley of Boonville. He learned the hard way, Mike Masterson writes, over 7 years ago when he entered into a legal dispute over his 2010 loan from Malvern National Bank. At the resulting 2015 trial, circuit judge dismissed the jury. Tiley had signed his loan note without realizing how he'd also surrendered his fundamental right to a jury trial. Here to talk more about this is Fort Smith attorney Joey McCutchen is on the line. Joey, how are you this morning?
Morning. Doing great, Paul.
Glad that you could spend some time with us. What do you know about this Kenneth Tiley case?
I know that it's an injustice to Kenneth Tiley and anyone else who are signing these pre-dispute jury trial waivers. What happens, Paul, is they shove a bunch of papers in front of you. There's unequal bargaining power. And before you know it, you've waived your right to a trial by jury. And that's exactly what happened to Kenneth Tiley, and he's paying a huge price. We have a procedure. It's called the Constitution. And our Constitution, Article 2, Section 7, says that the right to trial by jury shall remain inviolate. Now what we had, as you referred to, in a special session, no doubt, last year, Bob Ballinger, at that time Representative Bob Ballinger, and Senator Hutchinson ran this bill. 3 months after the Supreme Court had said what they did to Kenneth Tiley was unconstitutional, because a right to trial by jury can be waived, but it's only after litigation begins, when people know what their rights are, when they know how their rights have been violated. A person can do that. So for anyone to say that, we're just trying to restore the people's right to contract, come on. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and that's what they were saying at the time, the people's right. But this particular language, was this specifically put in there by the Bankers Association, by Jeremy Hutchinson, by Bob Ballinger, because the Supreme Court said that Kenneth Tiley should be able to take the bank to court?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They drafted a provision, and the provision said, this was after the Supreme Court held what they did to Mr. Tiley. And I don't represent Mr. Tiley, but I see an injustice here. And this Senator Stubblefield's bill that's before the legislature now, we're trying to get that through the process. But last year in special session in 2018, they drafted a provision that said a written provision in a contract to borrow money in which the parties agree to waive their respective rights to a trial by jury is valid and enforceable. Well, most everyday citizens that go in and sign this paperwork don't read the fine print. And there's not a knowing waiver of your right to trial by jury. It's not negotiable with the bank. So why do they want this so bad? It's just another special interest attack on the right to trial by jury in Arkansas. We've seen it over and over and over again.
You know, what I find interesting about this, okay, with specifically this case of Kenneth Tiley, so, he deals with this in 2015. His attorney appealed to the Arkansas Supreme Court, arguing whether it was legally acceptable for a citizen to waive constitutional rights before any conflict between parties were ever anticipated. In 2017, the Supreme Court ruled such pre-dispute waivers of rights were unenforceable. So they're saying, okay, so you can sue. The High Court determined the right to choose trial by jury is a fundamental protected right by the state's Constitution. And then, after the Supreme Court's ruling, the Arkansas Bankers Association headed to the legislature to find sympathetic ears of former Senator Jeremy Hutchinson and Bob Ballinger. They agreed to carry the bill, and that would satisfy the Supreme Court's ruling. So, I mean, I find that incredible that we have one man's case, and as soon as they passed this language, all of a sudden now he can no longer sue the bank again. So he's right back where he was originally. Is that true?
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars later, he's right back without the right to trial by jury. Gosh. And had to go before a bench trial. Let's not forget that you mentioned it early on. When they came back in the legislative session, in a special session, I mean, why are they considering this particular bill for the powerful banking association in special session? Well, because it was not only about banks. The nursing homes were behind this also. The powerful special interest nursing homes were behind this. They wanted these pre-dispute jury waivers in their contracts also. But as you said, Jerry Cox understood, and he fought against this because, again, it was another price tag on the value of life, and they wanted folks to – we know what happens. Grandma breaks her hip. She's in the hospital. She needs to go into a nursing home, and they have the family sign these pre-dispute waivers that are buried in the contract to get people into nursing homes. So it's all about special interest, and we've got to hold the right to trial by jury inviolate, undisturbed. We can't having legislators passing these laws for special interest that undo the right to trial by jury. And that's what happened to Mr. Tiley. He's fought. He went to a bench trial. He appealed it up because he did not get a jury trial. Supreme Court ruled for him, and within months, certain legislators were talking to fellow legislators in a special session to take away his rights, and they've done it up until this point. And that's why I'm very, very happy that Senator Stubblefield is running this bill to restore the right to trial by jury for not only Mr. Tiley, but every Arkansas citizen who signs these unknowingly and non-negotiable the rights away.
You know, I kind of see a parallel here. You know, if you want to buy a house, most people are going to have a mortgage. They're going to have to go through a bank. Now, I don't know what Kenneth Tiley's original legal dispute with Malvern National Bank was. Do you know what it was, Joey?
Well, he tried to borrow money, and eventually there was a problem with the way that the money was loaned. I don't know all the details.
Okay.
But I know that he felt like that he was defrauded. Okay. And he wanted to enforce his right to trial by jury, and they said, "Oh no, you waived that right." And he said, "What?
Yeah.
How did I waive?"
That's fat. And so whatever the dispute is, we all know banks can be powerful, and banks can, make you feel like the little guy a lot of times. But it's interesting though. I kind of feel like this idea that you can't sue the bank that you've done business with is their argument. I find that very frustrating. I find it a similar argument to the way we can't sue the state of Arkansas now because of a Supreme Court ruling saying that there's now sovereign immunity and that the state can't be a defendant in her courts. It's very similar in a way, except, the bank these are private institutions, and the private institutions that have now used the government to craft the laws to their advantage and against the consumer. Really, this is a consumer protection issue, if anything.
Well, I mean, you can still sue them, but you just have to go before the judge. You don't get a jury before your peers, like our founding fathers thought was so important. As James Madison said, trial by jury in civil cases is as essential to secure the liberty of the people as any one of the pre-existent rights of nature. And what's happened, the banks they argued as recently as last week, oh, we're having to spend too much money and too much time for us to go before a jury. I mean, is that the crisis? And then they say that if we have a right to trial by jury for these consumers, the interest rates are going to go up. What? Are you kidding? That argument has been made, that it costs too much, that interest rates are going to go up, that these outside conglomerate banks won't do business in Arkansas. I mean, we can't give up our rights for special interest or the next crisis that's ginned up, because that's what's happened in every single case, Paul. Whether it's this big tort reform, when they wanted to put a $500,000 price tag on life, I mean, it's because, we want to protect doctors. We want their insurance rates to go down. Right. It's about profits of insurance companies, and we know that, period.
So I do want to mention before we go, Senator Gary Stubblefield, again, he has filed SB 558. It's an effort to repeal Act 13 of 2018, which was in that special session, and to restore the constitutional right to trial by jury. That would have restored Tiley's remanded trial in line with the Supreme Court's original decision back in 2017. Joey, do you have any update on that piece of legislation? We're nearing the end of session.
We are, and Senator Stubblefield is going to run that before the Senate Judiciary Committee the next time it meets. I think it was going to be run yesterday, but I think one of the senators was unavailable and had to be out of state. But it ran last week, and it fell one vote short. It ran late at night, and one of the senators had to leave early. Yeah. I think it was in good faith. And I think that senator said he would support Senator Stubblefield's bill to restore the right to trial by jury. So hopefully, and I hope people will call their senators and tell them to restore the right to trial by jury and do away with these pre-dispute jury trial waiver. We already have arbitration, which they've shoved down our throat, where we sign these arbitration agreements and give up our right to trial by jury. That's wrong. We should never be forced to give up our right to trial by jury just because we're doing business with nursing homes, businesses, banks, or anybody else. Our Constitution is too important for that. Our constitutional rights must be defended at every turn.
Yeah.
And Kenneth Tiley needs the support of the Arkansas people. So I encourage everyone listening to this, call your senator and tell them that Senator Stubblefield's bill, Senate Bill 558, is a heck of a bill, and we need it. I
agree. Joey McCutchen, it's great to have you on. Thanks so much. We could all be the next Kenneth Tiley. We need to remember that. Joey, you have a great weekend, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
All righty.
Have a great weekend.
Yes, folks.